I'll tell you what you want to hear.
And what's that?
Charlie had a dream of a red room. In his dream, a woman with a pale face, black eyes, and long black hair slipped silently into his room. She leaned over and whispered, "This is an evil place."
I have a distinct memory of walking down the bookshelf alleys of my elementary school library, towards a specific book rack in between the dusty encyclopedias and the kindergarten picture books. Surrounding it were books like Pete the Cat, Dr. Seuss, and Elephant and Piggy. But on that rack was the good stuff. It was my first exposure to horror. Almost every week there was a Goosebumps book I'd never read, or a collection of ghost stories I hadn't heard before. Every week was a new scary story. But what always stuck out the most, appearing just a handful of times a year, with harsh red and black text and haunting illustrations, was the series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Each book, published over the decade between 1981 and 1991, was a collection of folk tales from all around the Western world, compiled and retold by author Alvin Schwartz. The series was rooted in Schwartz's belief in the modern sophistication of children in experiencing horror media. In a 1985 interview for Journal Language Arts, Schwartz states, "One of the things I've been doing is using material that was once regarded as for adults, and I've discovered that children have gotten so sophisticated that it works." Schwartz thought it was not only healthy for kids to be scared, but that it could serve as an outlet for the anxieties and fears that come with being so young. However, following release, the public didn't see his stories in quite the same way. One parent told the Chicago Tribune that the books were violent, devoid of any morality, and sick, citing that the bad guys always win. Another compared Schwartz to serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, with one of the stories containing implications of cannibalism. One accused Schwartz of exposing children to the dark side of religion through the occult, the devil, and Satanism, no doubt spurred on by the Satanic Panic, which was in full force at the time. It was a widespread cultural panic about the influence of Satanism on children and in media that began in the late 80s and arguably still goes on today. Libraries everywhere began to be pressured by parents and school PTAs to ban Schwartz's novels, eventually landing the series the #1 spot on the top 100 most banned or challenged books from 1990 to 1999, and #7 on the list from 2000 to 2009, according to the American Library Association. While many of the criticism was placed on Schwartz's gruesome stories, critics paid special attention to the illustrations included in the books, done by Stephen Gammell, and it's not hard to see why. Accompanying each story was one of Gammel's illustrations. His style is hauntingly distinct, with a high contrast inkblot starkness in each of his works that create blurry, surreal images. Many of the illustrations have a feeling of permanent filth around them, objects bleeding into each other, hanging veins, strings of dripping blood, crooked branches, and wiry hair. Each one feels as if it's rotting, emulating the half-familiar, dangerous world of a nightmare. Gammell's illustrations were rarely literal interpretations of the stories, often opting to only touch on certain objects or themes present in the story, aiming for its emotion rather than its direct plot. What made the illustrations so profoundly striking and memorable was their ability to tap into the curiosity, excitement, and imagination of the subconscious. The story The Trouble dramatizes a real-life account of a ghost encounter, where a family experiences strange supernatural events over the course of 2 months. Yet for a story with a seeming basis in actual reality, its illustrations are threateningly bizarre, with ordinary household items floating in a stormy void alongside aggressive and alien geography. Running drops of ink run down the 2-page spread. Shadowy figures linger around veiny cracks. In the story's other illustration, a diseased, tendrilled cube hovers above a rectangular chasm, almost man-made, unnatural. It's easily Gammell's most abstract work for the series, but complements the story's paranormal atmosphere perfectly. In the story, a family is faced with the ununderstandable, a haunting, and the illustrations place the audience in precisely the same position. Even when they aren't necessarily scary, Gammell's illustrations certainly leave a lasting impression. With the constant controversy surrounding the books and often genuine horror within, the series felt almost forbidden, as if it was something someone as young as you wasn't supposed to see. It held the same feeling as sneaking downstairs to watch a horror movie your parents put on. It felt special among the tamer likes of Goosebumps or the books of Mary Downing Hahn. While the stories were often simple and not very frightening, the illustrations sold the darker themes, and together they created small vignettes of nightmares that stuck in the minds of children all across America's libraries. Whether it's two dead bodies unknowingly sleeping in the same bed, or a scarecrow coming to life and skinning its owner, or a killer hiding in the backseat of a car, only deterred by a tailgating truck's high beams. Schwartz's writings deal with the fantastical, the surreal, and the frighteningly realistic. The series was a gateway into more adult horror, heavier concepts, scarier realities. Schwartz wanted to encourage young readers to seek out scary stories, to read them, listen to them, write and create them. In the same 1985 interview for Language Arts, Schwartz says, "I think folklore can be reinforcing for kids who are having problems with self-confidence, to understand that folklore is something that unknown, ordinary people have created as expressions of some of their innermost feelings. It's really very important. They need to know this." In the bibliography of every installment of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Schwartz includes special indications for resources and other collections of stories that might be of particular interest to young people. His books became instant and infamous classics, coming in and out of the public mind in the decades since their release. Most recently, and perhaps most notably, when the series would receive a film adaptation in 2019.
Some people believe if we repeat stories often enough, they become real.
Very early on in production, Guillermo del Toro would be attached to the film, a filmmaker known for his visually stunning and often provocative work in projects like Pan's Labyrinth, the Hellboy films, Pacific Rim, P.T.,
on a Sunday afternoon. Don't touch that dial now, we're just getting started.
and Best Picture winner The Shape of Water. He would go on to serve as Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark's co-writer and producer, and for anyone familiar with his work, his influence on the film is obvious. The story follows four friends in the late 1960s who find a haunted book that begins to write stories that come true, picking them off one by one as they try to find a way to stop the dead witch behind it. The film takes on a stylized retro color palette, with the colors blue and orange present in almost every shot of the movie. Like the books before it, the film leaves some to be desired in its text, touching on themes of neglect and contemporary issues of the late 60s, but never committing enough to them to make it impactful.
Rules don't apply to draft dodgers. You think I wouldn't find out? Ramon Morales.
However, also like the books, the real meat is all in the visuals. Almost every monster in the film is based directly off of Gamel's illustrations from the books.
He was very vocal about, the art direction, and we would constantly send him updates. But what I recall is the first edict was they have to be as true to the source material as possible. Like, that's bottom line. They have to be a representation of that original art. So we had the pictures everywhere as a constant reminder to everybody, like, this is what we're going for.
We would literally take the drawing, the Stephen Gamble drawing, and in Photoshop, lay it over to make sure that all the lines are right where they should be and that sort of thing.
It was important to the team and to Del Toro to capture the iconography of the books, the images and the stories that made it so powerful, and to do it practically. Assumedly aimed towards younger audiences, the film features some surprisingly disturbing deaths, much in the spirit of its source material. An especially notable death happens early on in the film from the Scarecrow Harold, a shockingly explicit death highlighted with unforgettably visceral sound design. The majority of the stories in the film are remixed from those in the books, sometimes rearranging or combining two or more stories. Such was the case in the death scene for Augie, portrayed by Gabriel Rush, which puts together two of the series' more infamous stories. This is also seen in The Jangly Man, which is in part an invention by the filmmakers and an amalgamation of the stories Mita Doki Walker and What Do You Come For?
Mita Doki Walker!
The scene where Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is at its most impactful, stylistically, is better shown than described. "2019's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark continues a legacy of its source material by pushing the boundaries of kids' horror with nightmarish monster sequences and strong visual horror that would earn it a PG-13 rating from the MPAA, and mild criticism questioning the intended audience of the movie, writing the line between the childish and the adult. Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories and Stephen Gammell's illustrations are folk tales that prey on the unique and unfiltered imagination of a child. They evoke the abstract, the unknown, and the fear and promise of an elusive adult world. The series' horror and children's horror as a whole serve as a means for a child to explore their fears and anxieties in a safe environment, removed from any real danger. What made Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark special was the way it gave kids a small peek into adulthood, what could truly be scary. It reflected a child's need to witness the adult, to touch it and retreat to safety, to close the book or turn off the screen. Children know when they're being talked down to, and so long as horror remains as clearly defined fiction, it deserves a place in their lives. Not too long ago, there was a time when we all couldn't wait to grow up, when we could pretend, for a moment, that those scary stories were real. As adults, are we still afraid of scary stories? Maybe never in the same way we were as children.
Okay, there, I saw it. Can we go now?